Hello and welcome to Grognard's Solo Gaming. I am the Grognard and today we are continuing with Curse of Strahd. But before we get started, there are a few things that I'm going to mention, and the first one is the fact that this series has been running for a whole year now, and though I could worry about the fact that the party is still in the village of Barovia and that they are on day 6 of their adventure, and that I just might die from old age before the adventure is finished, I'm instead going to focus on the positive and the fact that the series is still going and that my interest in the characters and the story is still alive and well. Also, a few in-game things. I sometimes mention sun crosses in the story, and because there have been Christian crosses in the images, I think most people have realized that those are the same symbol. The idea of the sun cross has nothing to do with crucifixion, however, but it is instead the image of a sundial seen from above, looking like this, symbolizing the 4 cardinal directions and the omnipresence of Sathramelin, and when there is a longer part on the cross, it is the elongated shadow of the sundial as the sun hits it from the opposite side. I also mentioned 2 languages that are part of the game world, and those are Locaire and Ehelis. They are the in-game equivalents of Latin and Greek, and the reason they exist is that they explain the use and influence of those languages in the game world, meaning, as an example, a character could say quid pro quo, and it would be fine because it's Locaire. Ehelis is older than Locaire, and both are dead languages spoken and written almost exclusively by highly educated people. Finally, there is also Accrithian that has been used but that has not been named yet, and it is the oldest of these languages and it is the equivalent of Sanskrit. And with that out of the way, let's return to the village to find out what happens during the rest of the 3rd day of the census and what Janosch does after knowingly sending Seraphine and Irina into a dangerous situation. Janosch is finding it hard to focus on anything but what might be happening to Seraphine and Irina. Could he change his mind if he goes after them now? Or is it already too late? He's no expert in divination or precognition, but he guesses the defining moment was when he said no to going with the women. At least that was how it had sounded from what Madam Eva had said. The witch hunter looks up and down the street he's standing on. The mist still clings to the houses and the sun is struggling to get over the horizon. There's not a soul in sight except for the paladins standing guard outside the house that Friedrich and the others are currently visiting. In an Agremenian village there would have been a lot of activity already, but it makes sense that the Barovians would wait for daylight before they dare to venture outside. Janosch wonders how the villagers survived the winter, but instead of pursuing that thought, his mind returns to Seraphine and Irina. What if one or both of them don't survive? Would that mean he and the others were stuck in this land forever? What if they managed to defeat the vampire lord but still could not get through the fog? And if Seraphine died because he chose to put her in danger, could he ever return to Agremeni? He had already been in trouble with the church twice, and both times it had nearly cost him his life. It was highly unlikely he would be allowed to live when it was found out he had gambled with an Asimai's life. How long had they been gone? 20 minutes? 30? Why were the others still in that house? Friedrich rarely allowed for more than 10 minutes for dealing with families. Finding it hard to stand still, Janosch puts the paint bucket and brush by the building and tells the paladins he's going to go help search the tavern. Despite the empty streets, he makes a conscious effort to keep his pace down in order to attract as little attention as possible. The Blood on the Vine tavern is dark and quiet, except for a few ravens perched on the roof and the chimney. Janosch pays them no mind and walks up to the window closest to the entrance, but the glass is too thick and crude for him to be able to see anything of the dark interior. He tries the door, which turns out to be locked. He knocks, a few seconds pass, and there is no answer. He knocks again, a little harder, still nothing. He doesn't really care if anyone sees him, but out of habit he still scans his surroundings before bringing out his thieves' tools. He chooses 2 lockpicks and kneels down to pick the lock. Because of the cold of the morning and the dampness from the fog, his fingers are cold despite his gloves. And despite his best efforts to stay calm, stress is building up in his body. So, even if the lock is technically easy, the long-ago street urchin breaks one of the lockpicks inside the lock. He curses and hurries around to the back of the tavern. Trying the back door, Janosch finds it unlocked, and he realizes it has probably been that way since he picked the lock 2 days ago. It made sense if neither Ivan nor his friends had used this door. The witch hunter draws his short sword and slips inside. The kitchen is dark and dusty, just like last time, and nothing seems out of place. Moving carefully towards the next area, Janosch somehow manages to make the floor creak, and he begins to wonder if his bad luck is a punishment for risking Seraphine's life. Or had he done more than that? Had he, in fact, betrayed her? He puts the thought out of his mind and focuses on the task at hand and moves on. In the next room it is also dark and quiet, and there is no sign of either Seraphine or Irina. The dead bodies are gone and the blood has been mopped up. Except there's something on the counter. It looks like an envelope, and Janosch picks it up. Written in what might be the most sophisticated handwriting the witch hunter has ever seen is the name Friedrich Dümmler. The letter is sealed with red wax imprinted with the crest of the von Sarovich family, a regal raven on a stylized kite shield. Janosch curses. This is not good. This is not good at all. He considers opening the letter but decides against it and hurries out the back door. When he sees the envelope, Friedrich is glad Janosch insisted on talking to him alone inside the kitchen of the tavern. The cleric opens the envelope and begins reading the letter he finds within. When he's done, he closes his eyes and the witch hunter can see the tension spreading across his commanding officer's face, and he takes a step back. The next second, Friedrich roars before kicking a chair, flipping a table, and finally taking his mace and smashing every old item left on the kitchen workbench. When he's done, the cleric takes a deep breath, sighs, and hands the letter to Janosch. The witch hunter proceeds to read the letter, written in the same perfect handwriting that was used on the envelope. Esteemed Father Dümmler, you and your allies from Agremeni are hereby most cordially invited to the noble wedding of Lady Irina Kolyana, daughter of Burgomaster Kolyan Indirovich, to Count Strahd von Sarovich, Lord of Barovia. The blessed ceremony takes place this evening under the roof and protection of the ever-unconquered Castle Ravenloft. You and your allies can expect the finest of music and a feast of such delight and splendor as to be worthy of the gods themselves. From this evening's dusk until dawn tomorrow, you and your allies from Agremeni will all be under my protection, and nothing untoward will be allowed to befall you. Not within the walls of my castle, nor within the borders of my land. So please, dress for the occasion, come freely and of your own will, grace us with your presence, and leave some of the happiness you bring when the celebrations are over. Your humble host, Count Strahd von Sarovich, Lord of Barovia and Master of Castle Ravenloft. Janosch sighs and sits down on one of the chairs still standing. Strahd's servants must have taken Seraphine and Irina, but there is no sign of a struggle in this place. But now the Count is marrying Irina? I thought he was turning her into a vampire or a spawn, but marry her? It seems, I don't know, bizarre. Yes, I'm not surprised by the lack of struggle. He is a 400-year-old vampire and lord of what I suppose is a whole country. I expect his resources to be vast. He could have sent any number of soldiers or vampire spawns. But the marriage thing? Bizarre seems like a good word to describe it. You're right about his resources and ability to have the women kidnapped. But was this luck or coincidence? I mean, how much of what we have done has he known about? Did he know to send people to the tavern ahead of time? Has someone been watching us? Exactly. And that is a source of immense frustration. The fact that we apparently have been unable to avoid detection raises 100 questions about von Sarovich's choices and actions. If it was not luck or coincidence, why kidnap the women when they were alone? Why leave a written invitation? Because at this point I doubt we are much of a threat to him. So why have his minions avoid us, only to invite us to see him at the castle? Janosch shrugs. And has he known all along what we have been doing in the village? And if so, why hasn't he sent someone to stop us? Does he not care? Does it not matter? Or does it even benefit him in some strange way? The witch hunter shakes his head. You're right. There are too many questions, and I don't think we have enough information to answer them. Friedrich furrows his brow and falls silent. After a few seconds, he says, "Agreed. There's no point speculating about his motives. We need to figure out what we're going to do, so let's break it down logically. Either we go to Castle Ravenloft or we don't. If we do, we either use the invitation or we don't. But even with all the troops under my command present, we would have zero chance of taking a castle like Ravenloft." Janosch nods. "Perhaps we could scale the walls and sneak inside." "You perhaps, but the 4 or 6 of us don't have a chance to remain undetected for long enough to get anything done, even if we do reach the inside." Janosch opens his mouth to speak, but Friedrich cuts him off. "No, you are not sneaking into the castle. If he has undead servants, staying hidden is more difficult, and though I know you're skilled, I think you would be found. And even if the protection he speaks of in the invitation is real in the first place, I doubt he would honor it if we snuck inside." "But if he does honor it, and we do go, then we're leaving with Seraphine, but not Irina, and according to Madam Eva..." "We need Irina, yes, and Ismark won't be happy, though it seems he's not invited anyway." Friedrich pauses and taps his fingers on the kitchen workbench. Then he says, "We need to ask him, Ismark I mean, about the size of Barovia and the Count's approximate resources. But if the invitation is honest, we go, we get Seraphine, we leave. If it's not, we go, we get imprisoned or executed." "True, and if the invitation is honest, then he'll let Seraphine leave at sunrise anyway, and our chances of fighting him to free Irina, well..." "I doubt we would be allowed weapons or armor, and even so, I don't think we have much of a chance, unless..." "Unless what?" "Unless we could get our hands on that sword the fortune teller told you about. Assuming it's real at all, that is." "If it indeed creates sunlight, then yes, we would have a chance, but as far as we know, it's in the crypts under the castle, so if we doubt our ability to sneak around, then I don't think we can realistically get our hands on it." "I guess not, and the invitation protects us from sundown at best, so no arriving early. It's quite infuriating, but I suppose we don't go, and then we pray to Sathramelin that von Sarvich is true to his word and lets Seraphine go. Or that somehow the women are able to escape." "So, we accept the loss of Irina. I guess she'll be undead the next time we see her then. And though it is not completely impossible, vampires rising up against their creators is extremely rare." "Yes, so we probably shouldn't count on her helping us, and we'll have to do without that book, I suppose." "The Liber Sanguinis, yes. Speaking of that, what is Sathramelin called in the lands east of Agremeni?" "The Lord of the Rising Sun. Why?" "I forgot to mention, but Madam Eva seemed to argue that the Morning Lord and Sathramelin are one and the same, that perhaps he was known as the Morning Lord in the past." "There are magically preserved history books written in a Hellis that are over a millennia old, and there he is named Sathramelin, with the worst recorded regional bastardization being Cathramelos, so it seems far-fetched that they would indeed be one and the same. Also, I have never seen Barovia mentioned in a single history book, and I have studied many of them." "And yet it seems von Sarvich has written a book in Locaire, one of our historical languages." "It's perplexing, no doubt, but now is not the time for this discussion. We'll have to talk about it later. We need to inform Ismark, Parpol, and Donovich." The cleric and the witch hunter go and get the Barovian men and the paladins, and once the brothers are standing guard just inside the door and the rest are all seated in the tavern, Friedrich explains the situation. Ismark becomes furious and curses the devil Strahd. Parpol also gets angry, saying,
"First my uncle, now these kind-hearted women. He has gone too far."
Meanwhile, Donovich looks troubled but remains quiet. The burgomaster gets up and starts pacing the room. "We must do something." Friedrich asks him about Barovia, and the fighter explains that the land inside the fog is quite small, as far as he understands it. It might even be possible to travel from the village of Barovia in the east to the village of Kresk in the west in a single day, and apart from those two villages, the only other settlement is the town of Vallaki. Ismark also says that as far as anyone knows or has seen, there are no soldiers in Castle Ravenloft, though it should still be considered highly dangerous, as very few who have traveled there have ever come back. With the new information, Friedrich and Janosch start discussing how it makes sense that there are no soldiers in the castle, as it would be extremely difficult to feed them when the peasants seem to barely be able to feed themselves. As they move on to theoretical calculations on how many undead there could be and how many blood-drinking vampire spawns could sustain themselves on 2 villages and 1 town, Ismark has had enough. "Please, father, are you going to help rescue my sister or not? Because I'm going either way, and if I die, then so be it." Purple stands up.
I am coming with you, boss.
Friedrich also gets to his feet. "It would be suicide, Mr. Kolyanovich, and it does your sister no good whatsoever." "I don't care, I'm going. I would rather die doing this than live and have done nothing. Too many Barovians are paralyzed by fear of the Devil Strahd, but I refuse to be another petrified coward in the shadow of the vampire." Purple nods.
Exactly. It is time to fight back.
The cleric curses quietly. "What about the village? What about the villagers? Are you going to abandon them just so you can have a few hours of feeling good about your own death?" The Barovian fighter hesitates for a second or two, then he says, "They never wanted me as their burgomaster anyway. I was always Ismark the Lesser, remember? If I'm so lesser, they'll be fine without me. And if not, they deserve what's coming to them. The Night Mother can have their souls for all that I care." With that, Ismark stomps out of the tavern, closely followed by Purple, who has to hunch down in order not to hit his head on the doorframe as he exits. Friedrich sits down heavily on one of the chairs. Donovich looks at him and asks,
What now, master?
"Now, you and I and the brothers complete the census, but if there are any zombies and rats left, we'll leave them, as we just lost our 2 strongest fighters, and I want to avoid injuries, or we won't have the power to help any villagers in need."
If we're not fighting, I'll search this place and a few of the empty houses, I guess.
"Excellent, Janosch, you do that." With that, everyone except the witch hunter leaves the tavern, and as he is tired and somewhat demoralized by the recent events, his search of the place is only half-hearted. But despite that, he still finds a false bottom in a closet on the 2nd floor, and underneath there is a backpack full of items. Janosch empties it on the bed in the same room and can quickly identify a complete set of thieves' tools and 6 vials of green liquid that is most likely poison. There is also a bag full of ball bearings, string, a bell, a few candles, a crowbar, a hammer, a few pitons, a hooded lantern, 2 flasks of oil, some rations, a tinderbox, a water skin, and finally a solid roll of hempen rope that is strapped to the side of the backpack. The witch hunter takes most of the contents as well as the backpack itself, leaving behind the water skin, tinderbox, and rope, as those are things he already owns. He also discards the rations in case they have been poisoned to punish a potential thief. While searching, he also realizes that the tavern has been an inn at some point. There are a few guest rooms on the 2nd floor, 4 of which seem to have been taken over by the Vistani women, while the barkeep must have been sleeping somewhere else. In the cellar, Janosch finds a makeshift bed that would probably have been the barkeep's, but to the witch hunter it seems more appropriate for a dog than a human. He also finds racks of wine bottles, most of which are labeled purple grape mash by the Wizard of Wine. There are a few other types of wines, but Janosch isn't really in the mood for looking at them. Feeling done with the tavern, Janosch steps outside and realizes Ismark has run off with the key. The witch hunter sighs and proceeds to lock both the front and back doors using his lockpicks. Once that is done, he walks to the graveyard by the church and picks up a shovel. As he exits the graveyard, he stops and looks back at Castle Ravenloft. It is a faint but ominous silhouette in the daytime mist. How far away is the castle really? Probably around 2 miles as the crow flies, and also several hundred feet above the village as the castle rests on a mountaintop. But because of the dense forest and steep mountainside in that direction, Ismark and Purple would not be able to go that way, so it would take them at least 2 hours to get there. Using his best estimations, Janosch figures the 2 Barovian men are going to have around 10 hours of daylight after they reach Castle Ravenloft. Should they have gone with them? He certainly wanted to, and he certainly wanted to fight and kill Strahd, but now was not the time. Going to the castle just wasn't the strategically correct thing to do, and unlike the Barovian men, he was not willing to die for Irina. Janosch forces himself to end his reverie and heads east of the graveyard. Locating Morgantha's grave is easy, and luckily for the witch hunter it turns out to be shallow as he begins to dig. Under barely 2 feet of dirt he finds the dismembered and burnt body of the night hag. Though the damp earth has absorbed a lot of the stench, Janosch still has to hold his breath as he pulls the remains out of the earth. He picks up the arms and starts carrying them towards the graveyard, but then he stops. The graveyard should be sanctified, but all the dead buried there rise at night, meaning holy water or no holy water, it might not make a difference. But if it is indeed the graveyard itself or something in it that causes the dead to rise, then simply removing Morgantha's remains would probably be more effective. After a few seconds of deliberation, Janosch carries the arms north into the woods and simply throws them into the bushes. Then he makes one more trip for the legs, followed by one final one for the torso. Then he takes the head and finds his way over to the hollow tree, where he has hidden the severed head of Doru, the vampire spawn, and also the pot he used to collect the blood of the heretic Bildrath Cantemir. Checking so the blood-crusted sack is still there, the witch hunter reaches inside to get the pot. Then he moves away for a bit, as not to draw attention to the hollow tree, and builds a fire pit, and goes to collect water from the well in the village square. And once the fire is going and the water is boiling in the pot, he drops Morgantha's head into it. Then he waits. He tries to study Terambor's notebook to pass the time, but the man's handwriting is worse than the witch hunter's own, and it's all quite esoteric and metaphorical. It seems Terambor was intelligent and surprisingly well versed in magical theory for a wizard's apprentice. But his writings are still nearly unintelligible, and once Janosch gives up, the only new things he remembers reading about are something called the hole in the world, 2 terms in Locare, Aberrans Creo and Aberrans Muto, and finally something called Decatrian Grammaton, that he can identify as the ancient language Ehelis, though he doesn't understand what it means. Frustrated by the book, Janosch puts it back in his satchel. The process of cooking and cleaning Morgantha's skull until it is nothing but bone is quite distasteful, even to the witch hunter, and once he is done, he smells his gloves and winces. Then he throws them on what remains of the fire. The night hag's skull looks human except for the crooked and sharp fangs, and Janosch holds it up.
Now will you talk to me?
Yes, you got me, but it's easier at night, so call me after the sun goes down.
Fine.
The witch hunter places the skull in his backpack and heads into the village to find Friedrich and the others. He figures it is a little past midday, meaning Ismark and Parpol would have reached Castle Ravenloft a while ago. Were they still alive? And what about Seraphine and Irina? It was perhaps 8 hours until the sun would go down and the wedding would begin. Just leaving them there feels wrong, but Janosch reminds himself that using the invitation would be a display of weakness, a kind of surrender. Entering the castle as a guest without weapons and at the mercy of the vampire would make them subject to his rules and whims. Even if he was a man of his word, attending the wedding without a fight would be even worse, and a fight was out of the question, at least for now. It is late in the afternoon when the census is over and the cleric, the witch hunter and the paladins return to the burgomaster's house. Janosch isn't sure if they are welcome guests in Ismark's house anymore, but most of their belongings are in there, so he picks the lock and lets the others inside. Morale is low and everyone is tired. Friedrich sets up a guard schedule for 1 person at a time, and everyone taking 2 hours each. Janosch considers contacting Morgantha, but he's too tired and decides against it. The next morning, Seraphine wakes up and realizes that she's already awake. She is standing by a window somewhere high up, looking out over a mist-filled landscape. The sensation is confusing at first and then nauseating. She turns around to see where she is, but before she can formulate any thoughts, the room starts to spin and breathing becomes difficult. She grabs the window frame for support, but it's not enough, and she closes her eyes and slides down on the floor. Somehow she has been awake but unaware. Why? How long? Where is she? Faces, voices, places, smells, fragments of memories, disorganized and unpleasant. One by one, they bubble up from the murky darkness of the sorceress's mind.
Lady Kolyana, Miss Seraphine, come, your carriage awaits.
bride and the maid of honor be so kind as to follow me, I will escort you to your room. This way. Isn't it wonderful? I will finally be Countess Irina von Sarovich. It's like a fairy tale. Just ring the bell if you need anything. I don't know, soot, salt, string, twig, a grasshopper, or perhaps 2 pounds of bat guano. Really, any amount of bat guano is fine. No? You're sure? Okay. Ah, yes, the half-blood. How quaint. Well, welcome, I suppose. I will be officiating the wedding after sundown. In the meantime, I'm sure you can partake of the edible things, if you're so inclined. My oh my, aren't you just divinely delicious, little angel? I'm Alira. Maybe I'll see you later. Wait, are you all right? Oh, it's the mind mist. You got it bad, I can tell. Yeah, that's going to kick like a mule when it wears off. Trust me.
Seraphine, it's so nice to see you. Isn't this a fantastic wedding? Have you tried the wine? Or the food? It's so good.
What did that bitch Alira say? Did she talk shit about me? I'm sure she did. You better watch it, new girl. You know, I'm so glad I decided to come. Irina wants me to walk her down the aisle, since our father isn't here to do it. And it will be my honor. Don't worry about my sisters. Their bark is worse than their bite, most of the time anyway. And they still get a bit jealous. But where are my manners? I'm Lady Verona. And don't you look lovely, my dear? The future Countess von Sarovich could not have found a more radiant maid of honor.
Do not worry for your friend. Though I condemn her to eternal hunger for living blood, she will not be truly undead. She will be a half-breed just like you, half human, half vampire, a daywalker, a dampier.
Seraphine opens her eyes. Strahd, he did this to her, with a spell or some dark power, in the tavern. And now she's in his castle, Ravenloft. She looks around in the room. It's large and lavish, furnished with things that each probably cost more than an average Barovian makes in a lifetime. There are 2 doors, one of them leads to a balcony, the other one to somewhere in the castle, she thinks, but she can't remember exactly where. The sorceress can see her and Irina's armors and weapons on a velvet sofa alongside their clothes. Seraphine gasps and looks down. She's wearing some kind of a black dress. She immediately starts taking it off, clawing at it in disgust. Once it's off, she feels a little better, but she's still unable to stand, and she crawls over to her things and starts to get dressed while half lying on the floor. Had she put on the black dress herself? Yes, and she had helped Irina put on her wedding gown. It too had been black, but much more elaborate. Irina, where is Irina? Once back in her own clothes, the sorceress drags herself up on the sofa to look at the bed, hoping that perhaps somehow her friend is asleep in it. But it's empty and she is alone in the room. Is Irina all right? Can she trust her memories? Has Strahd turned her friend into a dampier, whatever that is? Had he bitten her? Had any of the vampires bitten her? Seraphine feels her neck, squeezing it with her hands, and looks at her wrists and arms. She sees no scars and feels no pain. Except for the nausea and a dull headache, she's seemingly unhurt, though she feels strange, different somehow. She doesn't really want to think about it, but she feels betrayed, and Strahd, the thought of him makes her whole body cold and numb. Never has she experienced such power, such darkness, or such evil. She doubts she could ever fight him, but she also knows she has never hated anyone or anything as much as she hates Strahd von Zarovich. But for now, she just has to get out of here. Seraphine forces herself to stand, and on shaky legs she walks over to the balcony door. It's unlocked, and when the sorceress opens it, an icy wind howls and forces its way into the room with such force she needs to use both hands to close the door. Despite the surprise, she can conclude that she is high up on the eastern side of the castle. Also, the sun is about to rise, meaning whatever dark magic the so-called mind mist was, it had lasted for 24 hours. She really doesn't want to think about it, but could he use this mind power on her again? Would he? The mere thought makes Seraphine break out in a cold sweat. Then the sound of shouting outside the door interrupts her thoughts. Who is that? Are they coming here? She wants to escape, but she can't just leave Irina. She looks around, trying to come up with an idea, but her mind doesn't really want to cooperate, and she ends up getting into the bed and pretending to be asleep. It would at least explain why the black dress was on the floor. Seraphine barely has time to pull up the covers to hide her clothes before the door slams open. The sorceress knows it's Strahd without even looking.
Aasimar, the Countess is not well. Use your healing. Take care of her.
Seraphine has no choice but to look up. The vampire lord is standing at the foot of the bed with an unconscious Irina in his arms. He stares at the sorceress, and then his eyes glow with a soft amber light. As it happens, she remembers him doing the same thing in the tavern. Seraphine focuses her mind and reaches within for the flame-like sensation in her chest that is her connection to Sathramelin and the source of her magic. It's like a tiny candle next to the dark ocean of Strahd's power, but unlike in the tavern, this time it saves her, filling her mind with light. When the vampire's eyes stop glowing, she is still herself. Strahd gently places Irina on the bed.
Make sure she's all right, and don't leave this room. I will be back as soon as I have dealt with these untimely intruders.
As if reading Seraphine's mind, he adds,
No, it is not your friends.
With that, the master of the castle strides out of the room, and the sorceress can see a vaguely familiar elf in dark leather armor holding 2 scimitars standing in the corridor outside. Then the door slams shut and someone locks it. Seraphine immediately moves over to Irina, saying her name and patting her on the cheek. Are you all right? Can you hear me? The Barovian woman is unconscious and even paler than usual, but at least she has no visible injuries. The Aasimar reaches within and calls upon Sathramelin to heal her friend as she places her hand on her forehead. A soft golden light passes from her palm and into Irina, but nothing seems to change. Irina, please wake up. We have to go. Come on. There is no response. Seraphine looks at her friend's face, then with a shaky hand she lifts her upper lip, and there she can see the pointy tips of 2 barely visible extra teeth. They are hidden in some kind of a retracted state, but there is no doubt they are fangs like those of a vampire. So then the memory had been real. Strahd had turned her into a Dampier. Seraphine shakes her head. No, 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 no! Her eyes fill with tears as anger and despair take turns tugging at her heart. She wants to kill Strahd von Zarovich for what he has done, but how could she ever fight a creature of such immense power? And what if there is no cure for Irina? Then what? How could she... It doesn't matter. There is no time. Right here, right now, they simply need to escape. Everything else is going to have to wait. The Aasimar wipes her tears and looks at her friend. She has to take action, and though she knows it would be considered heresy in the eyes of the church, Seraphine doesn't care. She takes her thumb and presses it against the tip of one of Irina's hidden fangs. There is a sharp pain as it pierces her skin with surprising ease, and then blood drips into her friend's mouth. The Barovian woman immediately opens her eyes, but they do not focus on Seraphine. The sorceress gets off the bed and starts helping Irina to do the same. Come on, we have to get out of here, before he comes back. Her friend seems dizzy, but manages to stand on her own, and Seraphine walks over to the sofa to get the satchel containing her books. Irina's eyes are still unfocused and staring at nothing as she starts talking, seemingly to herself. I have been here before, and he chased me, covered in blood. He killed someone dear to me, but I escaped him. Irina looks up and out, her eyes focusing on something outside the window. I can escape him again. I know what I must do. Seraphine has just hung her satchel over her shoulder when Irina walks over to the balcony door and opens it. The ice-cold wind from outside instantly fills the room and rips the door handle out of her hand. Slamming the door open with such force, the inlaid glass shatters. Seraphine is surprised by the loud noise, but Irina doesn't react. The Barovian woman seems to be in a trance-like state, and she's not slowing down. She's simply heading straight out, with her eyes locked on the horizon. With a sinking feeling in the pit of her stomach, Seraphine realizes that her friend intends to throw herself off the balcony. She runs towards Irina, who is climbing up on the railing. "Wait, don't!" It's too late. Irina leans forward. Seraphine refuses to think or feel anything, because she knows she would falter if she did. So she keeps running, and, in what feels like a moment of complete madness, she lunges at her friend, tackling her and locking her in a bear hug, sending them both over the edge. Yasimai wishes she didn't have to open her eyes, but it's the only way. The timing has to be right. The icy winds bite into her face and fill her ears with a thunderous rumble. They also make it impossible for the mist to linger, and therefore she can see the ground below them in the tired light of the Barovian morning sun. Hundreds and hundreds of feet of sheer cliff as the mountain drops away under them. Seraphine cannot breathe, and she thinks her heart might have actually stopped, but she fights the panic and watches the ground. Then she tightens her grip around Irina and turns her attention inwards, closing her eyes and concentrating on the flame-like sensation in her chest. And when she feels it, she mentally screams at it. "Give me the wings! Give me the wings! Give me the wings! Come on! Please give me the wings!" The sorceress has heard that people's lives pass before their eyes before they die, and thus the memory of herself as a child, standing on the rooftop of the stables in the abbey, fills her with a grim certainty that she has failed, again, that it's over. But then a powerful warmth spreads from her chest and out through her whole body, and when she opens her eyes, she's glowing with a golden light, and they are no longer falling. Looking over her shoulder, Seraphine can see one of the wings that have manifested on her back, bright and golden as if made from light given physical form. Despite the relief and an overwhelming desire to catch her breath, the Aasimar knows the wings only last a minute, and that therefore she and Irina are far from out of danger. She hurries toward the ground as fast as she can. Her friend hangs limply in her arms, and she has not moved or tried to say anything since the sorceress grabbed her, indicating she is unconscious again. Looking below, Seraphine realizes that what she thought was the ground is just boulders sticking out of the fog, and the wings are about to dissolve. She looks around for anything that would indicate a good landing spot, but all she finds are some treetops. Is that the beginning of the forest? Can they make it that far? She decides to try and flaps her wings. Once, twice, then they are gone, and she and Irina are falling again. The sorceress tries to wrestle her way around her friend, to use her own body to protect her from the branches, and just as she manages, the first branch hits her. She thought she was glad they reached the forest, but the impact sends a blinding pain through her body, completely knocking the wind out of her lungs. She hugs Irina tighter and braces for the next impact. It hits her head, leaving her unable to tell up from down, and her ears fill with a ringing noise. But she holds on to her friend. More branches, more impacts, and more pain. But Seraphine is barely aware of them at this point. She is losing consciousness. Is she holding on to Irina? Have they reached the ground? She still feels as if she is falling, or rather as if the world is falling away from her. And then there is nothing but darkness. And that is where we are going to leave the story this time. And I thank you very much for watching or listening, and hopefully I will see you in the next video.